This beautiful and much coveted manly Verimi with the mid-side mod has been with me here since day one. And if you think this sounded great, well, I just saved you... Wait. This setup probably sounds all too familiar, right? Now, I've had this video in the planning for weeks now. I reached out to High Voltage Audio, Tone Projects, got everything organized. Then between a holiday and being slammed at the studio, Jordan at Hardcore Music Studio beat me to the chase. Same compressor, full budgets. My original title for this video was Mastering Compressors, Full Budgets, and his video is great. And it's probably inspired from the same place I was inspired from, Paul David's Same Guitar, Full Budgets video. Now, those are both incredible creators on the YouTube platform. I implore you to go check them out. But today, what we're going to do first is an old school technical deep dive. Okay, back to the roots of this channel, which I love doing these sort of technical deep dives. And that's how I've set up this video for you guys today, because in the world of compressors, especially for mastering, there's a huge gap in price points and there's a huge gap in different use cases. So I've got 4 contenders for this video to compare different price points of compression and what each brings to the table. The first contender is TDR Kotelnikov, coming in at $0. It is proudly digital and generally doesn't try to emulate any analog product. It puts a huge effort as a digital compressor into anti-aliasing, and the detection circuit uses a Hilbert transform. And that Hilbert transform allows the detector's RMS stage to automatically use the optimal RMS window size for each and every frequency. Renowned amongst the world's best mastering engineers as a top-tier digital mastering compressor, Tone Projects Unisum, and that comes in at $220. Now, whilst TDR Kotelnikov allows for both RMS and peak control parameters, Unisum allows for both these detection paths across 3 separate frequency bands, allowing you to filter the response and weighting of the detection circuit for each part of the frequency spectrum. Now, making our way to the analog domain, the HVA 4K by High Voltage, a take on the SSL 4000, a staple for every studio. Now, this style of VCA compressor is universally recognized for its ability to glue a mix, and it's really great in mastering too. This unit includes a few extra features, including some additional ratios, a true bypass, a high-pass sidechain filters, and a wet-dry knob for parallel compression. Now, I'm lucky enough to have in my studio this manly Verimi, a timeless classic for mastering studios worldwide, known for its warmth and character. To me, using this in sessions, the magic comes from its unique non-linearities. When it comes to compression ratios, as the signal gets hotter, the ratio leans in harder and vice versa. So you get this very smooth compression curve, but this also will set you back $5,000. So to explore these, I thought it was going to be an easy setup. Run some audio and call it a day. However, once I started matching the settings carefully alongside one another in Plugin Doctor, I began to realize there were some very unique qualities and strengths to each compressor, even when matched as closely as possible like I have here. So first I'm going to share with you my findings from matching these compressors, but then also I'm going to dial in each of these compressors to their own unique strengths and compare. Setting things up, I matched everything to the Verimi because it was the least flexible in terms of parameters and variability. So everything's trying to match to this, and here is the current compression curve I've got as closely matched up on paper. Now, it was relatively easy to match this up on paper with a compression curve, but some unique things arose in the Hammerstein graphs. The HVA 4K and Unisum both displayed the least amount of harmonic distortions, whilst the Verimi produced the most amount of harmonic distortions from around 200 to 300 Hertz. Now, upon processing the files, the Verimi with the same amount of downward compression also provided the most amount of headroom, taking a mix with a crest factor of -14.7 up to -13.4, whereas each of the other compressors all took the mix up to a crest factor of -14.4 to 14.6, barely moving the needle overall, even though all of these compressors were compressing around 2 decibels of gain reduction each. Now, I'm going to attribute this overall loudness boost from the manly Verimi due to the additional harmonics it's introducing in the low end. So first, let's listen to each of these 4 compressors level matched. See, for me, as a mastering compressor, the Verimu has a lot of weight. And this is really good when something needs that thickness. So if you have a listen between the Verimu and the TDR Katonnikov, I think they'll have the most stark difference in tone. But the TDR Katonnikov is a lot more clean and a lot more open. So two different use cases. More often than not, in my honest actual practice, I'm using the TDR Katonnikov more so than the Manley Verimu. The reason is most people nail their mixes. They get the tone right. And using something like the Verimu every single time can sort of go against the grain. If something is already warm and has the texture it needs, the TDR Katonnikov is a really good way to back off that. Now, the Unisum, something I really liked in the Unisum, because this is only my third or fourth time using the Unisum, because, as I said, I reached out to Tone Projects to include this here for the comparison, is the movement or transit information is being retained exceptionally well, especially the kick drum and snare drums punch. It does it in a really nice way. I think the best comparison will be between the TDR Katonnikov and the Unisum. In the Unisum, because it's got separate peak and RMS detector circuits or balances for the low, mid, and high, it's allowing a lot of that transit information to, I don't know, it's a little bit more musical. It's hard to explain. Just have a listen between the TDR and the Unisum. I really like the way I can hear the beats ahead of the kick drum in the Unisum, whereas all the other ones, because, well, the TDR Katonnikov doesn't have that sort of degree of flexibility that the Unisum has, but the Verimu and the high voltage audio, the analog ones, are way more warmer. They're much more tone driven, whereas the Unisum is really a nice way to compress a signal without losing some of those details. That actually sounds really good. That's just the default setting matched. It's actually a pretty good sound. Next, let's actually aim to dial these in to their strength. So I'm going to start with the TDR Katonnikov, and I'll show you how I set up the TDR Katonnikov typically. But typically when I'm using TDR Katonnikov, I've got these presets I've spoken about where I work off the lowest fundamental. And what we got here is a very slow attack, a very slow release. I'll show you exactly how I dial in TDR Katonnikov. Now, I start by using the delta signal to monitor what's going on in the difference. And this is something which you don't get with Unisum, where I couldn't find the setting for it in there, and you definitely don't get in the analog domain. The idea of monitoring the delta allows me to hear what the compressor is taking away, so I can hear if any of those transients are getting caught up too hard, or if there's a weird sort of pumping or sustain in my overall compression. Let me just loop that. Go listen to these drums at the start where we can really hear the pumping, and we'll just pull the threshold down so we get a little bit more compression going so we can really hear the effect of it. just makes all the drums just smack a little bit harder, and gives a good sense of depth there. So what I'm basically doing here, and I'll explain to you the main things I was tweaking. So I'll explain to you the things I was changing here. The first thing was the release time on the RMS. I wanted to be a little bit quicker because the average amount of compression was just holding on too much. And then the average release time of the peak, I wanted to be slower. So it didn't pump, but it just moved a little bit more with the actual rhythm of the song. The next thing was the knee. I just opened up the knee a little bit because it felt like the compression was kicking in a little bit too hard, a little bit too soon when I was monitoring the delta, and you overall get a much more punchier sort of sound. Okay, so that's how it works. So this is really cool. I was trying to figure out what I did right here with the Unisum, and it has to do with this weighting here. So what we'll do is, so the weighting affects how much of that band's signal affects the compression. So what I'm going to do is on the low band, because there's a lot of kick here, you'll actually get to hear how I'll start this at -24 and the kick drum will not be controlling much of the compression at all. But then as I crank it, you'll actually hear it pump with the kick. So it's a really unique way to get the low end to either make the mix move or not, or make a particular band move the compressor or not. So take a listen to this. So what I'm going to do is to try and dial this in perfectly, I've got the kick and the snare. So I'm going to use these weightings to make sure the kick and the snare sort of gel and push and pull this mix equally, so to speak. Need to hear an A-B. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing right now. I really like the way I finally got it into a pocket. That was a bit of fiddling around. So what I found was, so you're moving these weightings around, but then you've also got this ratio here. I think the ratio changes the way the RMS and the peak, like how much of each, I think, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure, but tweaking this here, and also I've found that the low fundamental of the snare was controlling a lot of that compression, so bringing this crossover point down. But that's actually really cool sound of compression. Let's have another listen. Wow, that sounds so much cooler than the TDR. I think they both sound good. I'm really happy with the TDR, but the Unisum, there's a certain character and tone to that. All the ghost notes, you can really hear all the ghost notes in that beat. and is wildly cool. I really like that. Okay, so that's a Unisum done. The main thing I really love this Unisum for is the crossover, the weighting, and the ratio allowed me to get the kick and the snare controlling that compression equally. So as powerful as the kick was, as powerful as the snare was, both those transients help move the compression with equal value because I could change that multiband detection circuit there. That is really cool. I might look at doing a video on exploiting this a little bit further, but that's really cool. Now let's go over the HVA 4K and let's see what we're going to change up here. I'm going to take the camera off my phone. So this is going to be a little bit different because I don't have a second camera. I do have another DSLR, but it's not here in the studio. So there's a dirty big light there, key light. So what I'll do is let's just polish this off. Oh yeah. Right, this might get a little bit annoying, but we'll film with one hand and we'll work with the other. Let's see what we get to. Okay, so something we need to be noteworthy of is this ratio dry-wet blends both the signals up together. So it actually adds the dry back onto the wet. So you need to compensate for it with the trim plugin. So we might just ignore that for the meantime and see what sort of sound we have at the moment. Main thing was this, where are we? The high pass sidechain filter. Something I learnt with the Unisum is the fundamental that snare drum does control the compression a lot. So I've set the high pass sidechain filter all the way up to 200 hertz, which has allowed me to dial this in really nicely. The attack, what setting is that? That's 3 milliseconds there. Felt like it just allowed the snare to crunch through just enough without being killed. So just enough of that transient isn't getting hammered too hard. The ratio is, I think it's 4:1. I can't see the dials. I'm just sort of sitting behind the desk, turning until it feels right. That sounds pretty good. We'll just go before and after. I really like that. That's really good. Now, I'm going to do everything with my left hand and film the Manly Varimu. We'll see where we get to. All right, so to do the Manly Varimu, typically how I'm using the Varimu is I'm really liking the limit setting because I can get this really nice crispy crunch on the very transients of everything and then just pull back the threshold and then work from there. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to try to dial this in. I'll typically have a faster release than this, but let's have a go. All right, so my arm's giving up a little bit there. So this is before and after. And you can just hear those harmonics, especially in the low end, come through a bit more on the kick and even on the snare, because the snare has quite a beefiness to it. So 4 different master compressors, 4 different budgets. What is my summary of this? Who is each one for? Now, the TDR Katalnikov, everybody should get. If it's for free, just get it, because it is a really good compressor that is basically my Swiss Army knife in sessions. Now, the Unisum mastering compressor is actually really good. Not because I didn't know it was good already based on reviews, but I hadn't used it, and I still haven't used it to its fullest extent. But just toying around with it now, this multi-band detector, I can see so many different use cases for where I'm sort of stuck in a pickle where I might have a really, like a huge 808 and this really snappy snare. One is really sustained and uses a lot more RMS values to control, and the other one is a snare with a lot of snappy peaks. I can see this being of a really good use case for many scenarios. So expect maybe another video with the Unisum, maybe a few more months once I've really run through it, but it is definitely a good tool that offers more flexibility in the digital domain, which I'm happily satisfied with, especially the ability. This whole concept is a really good concept. I see why people enjoy and love it. Now, the high voltage audio 4K. Now, I don't have bad things to say actually about any of these compressors really, because they all do something uniquely different. The 4K, would I be using it in mastering a lot? I'm going to say no. And the reason is I would be using this more in mixing, as in terms of on my mix bus, so I can mix into it. It has a really great gel that it gives in mastering, but it's not always the gel you need. Sometimes you need a little bit more flexibility in terms of the Unisum mastering compressor or the Katalnikov, where you can slightly dial things in. But as a mixing tool to just gel your mixes and work into, it's actually really good and definitely worth the value, because this has all switched pots here, and it's mastering grade in terms of the way it's been built and constructed, but just at a really decently affordable price. Now, the Verimu, $5,000 price point. Is it worth the money? Well, for what it is, and if you're the right person for it, it is worth the money. Does it get more runs on the board compared to Unisum or TDR Katalnikov? Well, I think TDR Katalnikov gets used so much more than Manly Verimu in my studio. The Verimu does get used because it has that special character you can't otherwise get, and when I need it, it is the star of the show. However, not every mastering session requires it. So it's sort of like, do you want that luxury? If you want that luxury, you're going to spend $5,000 to get it. But otherwise, there's a video I've done comparing the Verimu to digital emulations, and the emulations get close. It doesn't quite step over the mark, but the emulations get close. So there you are, 4 different price points. You got this free, 220 US, 850 US, 5,000 US. They've all got pros and cons to each one. If I'm advising the viewers, because I think it's really important I advise the viewers, get TDR Katalnikov as a bare minimum. If you're mixing a shit ton and you just want a vibe check on your mix bus that you mix through, the high voltage audios definitely should be on the cards for you. If you're somebody who wants to explore compression in unique ways, the Unisum is definitely something you should get. And then if you've got the cash and you just want that luxury of being able to get a little bit of flavor when the time's right, it's not something you'll always use, but the Verimu is definitely something that you can burn a hole in your pocket with if you've got cash there to spend, and do that. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, take care.